You ever had to ask yourself, is this wood safe to eat after having already eaten a piece of it? This is Gabon ebony, and while yes, it is not safe, or sorry, well no, it is not safe to eat, that's not really what we're getting into today. Ebony wood is extremely hard to get, but it's also nearly irreplaceable in instrument making, surprisingly enough. The ebony pieces here, as you see on the violin and guitar right here, are the fingerboard, the pegs, the chin rest, and also the tailpiece, as well as the fretboard of a guitar. These parts of instruments really are kind of integral, especially since they're a high contact surface. They need something extremely hard. The black woods, like ebony, are a very hard wood. They're something that'll put up with a lot of stress over time and not really morph and not really change its shape or get any sort of dents after a lot of time. They are among the hardest woods, actually, and the big reason also with violins and guitars is how well ebony holds a polish. But why is it so hard to get? Like, it grows in a good amount of places in Africa. Not a whole lot. Only about 5 countries have ebony forests. 6-ish. 5 or 6. It's not a lot of ebony forests. It's not a lot of places to grow ebony, but the places that do produce a lot of it. It's a very big product, and it's a big tree when you cut it down. It should be making enough wood for a long time coming. However, it doesn't. It's actually considered vulnerable as its conservation status. It's still pretty easy to bring it back from its potential for extinction. It's kind of just on its way there. It's not really about to be extinct. Ebony is pretty well off. Now, if you look at this map here of Africa, you'll see those darker red dots and those light red dots. Those represent densities and forests of ebony trees, actually. And it's fairly well populated in Cameroon and Gabon. This ebony here I have is from Gabon, but I'm actually going to be talking about Cameroonian ebony, which often is about the same thing. It's not really that different from most of the African countries. I mean, they're near the same place. The trees are going to look very similar. But ebony averages about $80 per board foot if you can find somebody who sells ebony for you. There's not a lot of people who sell ebony. It's really hard to find. You call somebody and they're like, you're looking for ebony lumber, it's better to go to Africa yourself and cut it down. And so I thought, well, what's between me and the tree in Africa that is preventing it from being easily accessible to us in the States here? And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the 3 parts of the problem, or at least the 3 levels of management here that we're looking at. We've got the harvesting process, essentially from how they start the tree to when they're producing it, chopping it into manageable pieces, to the company management level, how much they're allowed to cut down, how often are they shipping it out, how sustainable is farming ebony trees, and then the international handling, like tariffs and all that sort of fun stuff when it comes to one country wanting to send product to another country in a sort of trade situation. If we look here, that is how they start ebony trees. They plant a leaf in the soil and it just kind of starts growing. A lot of trees actually do that. It's very simple. It kind of just starts growing. Trees are very hardy. Trees want to grow, and they'll grow from the smallest pieces. That's why trees are so common of flora. The thing with ebony trees is it takes about 70 to 200 years after they've been planted in the forest to become a usable, mature size that can be harvested and actually chopped into reasonable chunks. It's then debarked, cut into a rectangular log, and then into smaller pieces that are actually usable in violins, etc. And a lot of times in other artwork pieces. People use ebony for bowls and other small things, or pens even. This long growing time really causes ebony to hurt a little bit. It makes it so that ebony has a lot of chances to die as a young sapling before it gets a chance to be a big tree. I mean, forest fires and even just an animal eating a little twig coming out of the ground. It's not the easiest to grow a tree for 70 to 200 years. I mean, duh. The Ministry of Forestry and Wildlife in Cameroon actually sets a quota of 3,000 tons total of logging for companies within Cameroon to cut down and export. Taylor Sawmill, actually, or Taylor Guitars, co-owns Crelicam Ebony. They work together in in Cameroon to cut down trees in a sustainable way. To sustainably cut down a tree and harvest it, you need to be growing it more or at the same rate as you're chopping it down, which is really hard to do with a tree that takes forever to grow. That's why Crelicam was losing money for a long time. They also focus on good business practices for people in the sense of they look at the microscopic and the macroscopic view of Cameroon, and they don't really look at themselves. They looked more towards the people of Cameroon. And when they looked at the people of Cameroon, they realized these people need a living wage, and they want to pay those people a living wage, and they did. But they also want Cameroon to look towards making a sustainable farming industry for all logging in Cameroon, not just for Crelicam, and allowing the people to be part of that and live a reasonable life off of that. They have a lot of pathways to achieve this, but not a lot of pathways that work just by them working on their own. They need help with the Cameroonian government, and those strict logging laws of Cameroon don't really facilitate that. These strict logging laws and this quota kind of set an artificial amount of ebony that goes out into the world every year at about 3,000 tons. And that doesn't really do much for us. It's like diamonds. Whenever you grow, or whenever you're harvesting so many diamonds, or having a certain amount, if you control how much of that goes out into the world, the costs will skyrocket. If you say, oh yeah, only 3 diamonds show up every year, and you're the only people who have diamonds, then diamonds are going to be exorbitantly expensive. And that's essentially what's happening on a bit of a larger scale with Crelicam. They are kind of only able to put out so much ebony, and Cameroon's not helping that. The Forest Law Enforcement Governance and Trade Action Plan has listed ebony as a special product, subject to tariffs, and it's subject to tariffs. The action plan uses vague language when it comes to how to deal with special products, especially specifically ebony. They're supposed to be talking about this, but when you go to flex.org, it doesn't really give you any information there. So this vague language kind of has to be applied to this special product until they've come to a full decision on what to do with ebony. And this allows for loopholes in countries and allowing them to make this product make the tariffs for this special product higher and make it harder to get this product. And higher tariffs mean a higher cost of product when it comes to the customer side. Now, if we look here, where was that problem? In the harvesting process, the problem was time. It takes forever for trees to grow, especially ebony trees, and that's not really allowing us to have an easy time getting through the ebony tree, or getting to the ebony wood. In the company management level, these quotas are really causing ebony to be artificially inflated in price, and then the international handling, tariffs are really are really raising the price of ebony just because that's how tariffs work. Ebony has a reason to be expensive, several actually, and there's a lot of hoops for it to jump through just to get to your lumber store, or a lumber store, anyone who sells wood. But when you do finally find that person who sells ebony, just remember, you're not just paying for the wood. You're paying for everyone who's between the guy behind the counter and the tree that got planted hundreds of years ago. my sources, blah de blah.